What happens when a country music star who clawed his way back from addiction, prison, and rock bottom sits across from a talk show host convinced she knows better than everyone else? You're about to see one of the most explosive clashes daytime television has ever manufactured. Jelly Roll, the tattooed powerhouse with a heart as big as his voice, walked onto The View, expecting a warm conversation about his music and his extraordinary rise from the streets to superstardom. What he got instead was a live-in-air ambush from Joy Behar, who seemed determined to tear him down one smug comment at a time. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone sideways. This is a full-blown masterclass in how arrogance, timing, and the wrong attitude can push even the kindest soul to the edge. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe and drop your thoughts below because, trust me, you're definitely going to have opinions after this. The studio was buzzing that Tuesday morning as Jelly Roll adjusted his black button-down and settled into the iconic chair. Fans filled the audience, people who had followed his remarkable transformation from troubled kid to chart-topping success story. The energy was bright, hopeful, electric. Whoopi Goldberg wrapped the opening segment, smiled warmly, and introduced him. Our next guest has had quite the journey from time behind bars to topping the country charts. Please welcome Jelly Roll. The crowd erupted. Jelly Roll beamed, waving with that genuine charm only he can pull off. "Thank y'all so much for having me," he said, that unmistakable southern drawl melting the room. "I've watched this show for years. Being here is surreal." Sarah N. kicked off with easy questions about his music, collaborations, and tour plans. Jelly Roll answered with trademark humility. He spoke about how music saved his life, how his daughter inspired him to change, and how he hoped his platform could give others a second shot. "You know," he said, leaning forward, "people see the tattoos, the past, and they write me off before they know my story. But we all have the capacity to change. Every one of us." The audience hung on every word. This was the Jelly Roll fans adored: honest, vulnerable, it's unfiltered in all the right ways. Alyssa Farah Griffin asked about his criminal justice reform work, and he lit up. "I've been where these guys are," he said. "I know what it feels like when society counts you out. But nobody is just their worst mistake. People can change if someone gives them a real shot." Then, like a match to gasoline, Joy Behar decided it was her moment. She leaned back with that familiar smirk that longtime viewers recognized immediately. The "I'm about to start something" look, well, that's all very inspirational, she said, voice dipped in condescension. "But let's be honest. You spent years breaking the law, drugs, prison, and now you're sitting here acting like an expert on rehabilitation?" Instant silence. The air shifted so suddenly, you could almost hear the studio lights crackle. Jelly Roll's smile faltered. But only for a moment. He took a breath, straightened in his chair, and answered with calm dignity. "I think my experience gives me perspective," he said steadily. "I'm not claiming to be an expert on anything except my own journey. But if sharing it helps even one person avoid the mistakes I made, then it's worth it." Joy wasn't finished, not even close. She leaned back in her chair with that self-satisfied smirk she wore whenever she thought she'd landed a clever blow. "But don't you think it's a little convenient," she drawled, "that now that you're famous and making money, suddenly you're this reformed character? I mean, how do we know this isn't just good PR?" The camera zoomed in just in time to catch Jelly Roll's jaw tighten. His hands relaxed only moments before, briefly curled into fists, before he forced them open again. Around the table, the other hosts shifted uncomfortably, clearly blindsided by the sudden hostility. "Joy," he said, and there was a warning edge in his voice that anyone who truly knew him would have recognized instantly. "I think you're misunderstanding what this is. This isn't PR. This is my life. These aren't talking points. These are the real experiences that shaped who I am." But Joy had that glint in her eye, though. Predatory one that meant she smelled blood, and she was only getting warmed up. "Just saying," she continued, shrugging dramatically. "It's easy to preach redemption when you've got a record deal, sold-out concerts, and a fan base cheering you on. But what about the people you hurt getting there? What about the communities damaged by the drug trade you participated in? The accusation dropped like a hammer. The air thickened. Even the audience seemed to stop breathing. Jelly Roll's entire demeanor shifted calm, replaced by something raw and electric. His breathing changed. His posture straightened. And in his eyes, a fire was building, slow, dangerous, and unmistakable. "You want to talk about the people I hurt?" he said, his voice rising, cracking with emotion. "Fine. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about how every day since I got clean, I've tried to make amends. How I've tried to use my platform to help people instead of hurt them." Joy either didn't recognize the line she'd crossed or didn't care. But that doesn't undo the damage, does it? She pressed, "It doesn't bring back the lives lost to overdoses. It doesn't fix the families that were destroyed. You can't just sing your way out of that responsibility." That was it. Something inside Jelly Roll snapped. The carefully controlled composure he'd spent years building shattered under the weight of her relentless prodding. In an instant, he shot to his feet so quickly that his chair rolled backward across the stage. His 6-foot frame towered over the desk as his voice exploded through the studio. "Are you kidding me right now?" he shouted, his southern accent thickening with each word. "You think I don't carry that weight every single day? You think I don't know exactly what I've done and who I've hurt? Lady, you have no idea what you're talking about." The audience gasped. Camera operators scrambled. In the control room, producers debated cutting to commercial. At the table, Whoopi looked stunned. Sarah covered her mouth. And Alyssa sat frozen in disbelief. Joy, shockingly, looked almost pleased. "There it is," she said smugly, gesturing toward him like she'd just proven a hypothesis. "There's the real you. Underneath all that redemption talks, till the same angry criminal, just with better clothes." The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was Jelly Roll's heavy, shaking breath as he stared her down, equal parts fury, heartbreak, and something much darker. When he finally spoke again, his voice had dropped to a low, icy growl, far more frightening than the shouting. "You want to see the real me?" he said, leaning forward, planting both hands on the desk. "The real me spent 3 years in county jail thinking about every single person I hurt, every family I damaged, every life I helped destroy." Paused, his eyes burning into hers. "The real me has nightmares about kids who overdosed on drugs I sold. The real me goes to funerals for friends who didn't make it out like I did. The real me carries that guilt every damn day, whether you believe it or not." Joy tried to interrupt, but Jelly Roll's voice cut through her attempt like a knife through paper. "No, you wanted this conversation," he said, his tone slicing through the air. "So we're going to have it. You sit up there in your ivory tower, passing judgment on people like me. But what have you ever sacrificed? What have you ever overcome? You think redemption is some kind of marketing scheme because you've never needed it yourself." The camera zoomed in on Joy's face. And for the first time since the confrontation began, the cracks started to show. That trademark smugness faltered just a hair. "But enough for the audience to see it. I'm just asking the hard questions," she insisted. But her voice didn't carry the same sharpness. "Someone has to hold people accountable." "Accountable?" Jelly Roll let out a laugh, cold, empty, humorless. "You think you're holding me accountable? I hold myself accountable every single day. I work with organizations helping addicts get clean. I visit prisons and talk to kids making the same stupid mistakes I made. I donate to families who lost loved ones to overdoses. What exactly are you doing for the world besides tearing people down on television?" Whoopi finally tried to intervene, but Jelly Roll wasn't done. His focus stayed locked on Joy like he didn't even hear the attempt at moderation. "You want to know the difference between you and me?" he continued, voice steady and fierce. "I admit when I'm wrong. I own my mistakes. You sit here pretending you're morally superior, but you're just a bully with a microphone." Joy's face flushed not with embarrassment, but with anger. "How dare you call me a bully? I'm a journalist asking legitimate questions, Ab. About what?" He cut in, his voice rising to a roar again. "About how someone who screwed up can't possibly change? About how anyone with a criminal past should disappear forever? You're not asking questions, Joy. You're pushing an agenda. An agenda that makes people feel small so you can feel big. The other hosts looked between them like spectators at a tennis match, paralyzed. The studio audience was pin-drop silent, held in place by the raw electricity rolling off the stage. I've interviewed thousands of people, Joy snapped back, raising her voice now, defensive and desperate. I know the difference between genuine rehabilitation and convenient storytelling. And what I see is someone who learned to say the right words to make people forget what they really are. The words hit Jelly Roll like a punch to the gut. His expression shifted, hurt, anger, and then something surprising, pity, when he spoke next. His voice was quieter but far more powerful. What I really am, he said slowly, is a father who wants his daughter to be proud of him. What I really am is someone who knows what rock bottom looks like and wakes up every day choosing to climb out of it. What I really am is a human being who made terrible choices and is spending the rest of his life trying to fix them. He paused, letting the silence swallow the room. But what you are, Joy, he continued, is someone who gets paid to tear people down. Someone who confuses being mean with being smart. Someone who has never had to fight for anything real, so you don't understand what actual change looks like. Joy opened her mouth, but Jelly Roll held up his hand, a gesture that stopped her cold. I'm not done. His voice sharpened again. You want to talk about accountability? Fine. Let's talk about your accountability. How many people have you discouraged from seeking help because you make them think society will never accept their redemption? How many second chances have you crushed with your cynicism? How many families have stayed fragmented because you convince them people can't change? Every word landed like a weight dropped from a height. Joy's face showed each impact. She wasn't the confident aggressor anymore. She looked like someone realizing she'd picked a fight she couldn't control and definitely couldn't win. You'd think you're so clever, Jelly Roll continued, disappointment now outweighing the anger. You think you're exposing a fraud? But all you're doing is exposing yourself for who you really are. Someone who tears down because she's never built anything. Sarah attempted a diplomatic interjection, but it dissolved instantly. This wasn't a panel discussion anymore. It was a clash of two worldviews, cynicism versus redemption, punishment versus growth. I stand by everything I said, Joy declared, though her voice trembled. People have a right to be skeptical of these convenient transformations. Jelly Roll shook his head slowly. When he looked at her again, there was an unmistakable sadness in his eyes. You know what the really tragic thing is? You could have used this moment, Jelly Roll said, his voice low but echoing through the studio, to have a real conversation. About addiction. About criminal justice reform. About how we help people rebuild their lives. He shook his head, disappointed rather than angry. But instead, you chose cruelty. For no reason, except your own entertainment. The words dropped over the studio like a heavy blanket. Even Joy's expression wavered just for a heartbeat, as if she felt the weight of what he'd said. But her defenses snapped back into place, spine straightening, chin lifting. Don't lecture me about entertainment, she shot back. This is journalism. Asking the tough questions everyone else is too scared to ask. If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't put yourself in the public eye. Jelly Roll let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Tough questions. That's what you call this? He leaned forward. Then let me ask you a few. When was the last time you admitted you were wrong? When was the last time you showed real compassion for someone who messed up? When was the last time you used this platform to help someone instead of tearing them down? Joy opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She hadn't expected the spotlight to turn back on her, and it showed. She floundered, searching for footing in a conversation that had slipped out of her control. That's what I thought. Jelly Roll said, voice gathering momentum again. You can dish it out all day, but the second someone questions you, suddenly it's unfair. Whoopi tried to step in. Okay, I think we need to know. Jelly Roll turned to her, respectful but resolute. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this needs to be said. He faced Joy again. I came here in good faith to talk about music, about redemption, maybe even inspire somebody watching. Instead, I walked into an ambush from someone who decided before I sat down that I was a fraud. His voice softened, becoming somehow even more intense. You know what the saddest part is? You had a chance to be part of something positive today. You could have asked about the programs I support, the kids I mentor, the real work that's happening to help people change. Beat instead. You chose to be a bully. I am not a bully, Joy snapped. For what then? Jelly Roll exploded, his composure finally breaking. For getting clean? For turning my life around? For trying to help other people avoid the mistakes I made? What exactly am I being held accountable for besides having a past that makes you uncomfortable? The room vibrated with tension. Camera operators zoomed in on audience members, covering their mouths in shock. In the control room, producers were scrambling. Was this a catastrophe or ratings gold? You're being held accountable, Joy fired back, for profiting off a redemption narrative while real people are still suffering from the consequences of your actions. Profiting? Jelly Roll's voice cracked, raw emotion surging to the surface. You think I'm profiting from this? He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. Every dollar I make, every opportunity I get comes with the burden of knowing I have to earn it every single day. You think I don't remember that families lost people to drugs I sold? You think that just goes away? You think I sleep easy because I have a record deal? He leaned over the desk, inches from her face, voice trembling. I give away more money than most folks make in a year funding recovery programs. I spend my free time in prisons talking to kids who remind me of my younger self. I use every platform I have to tell people they can change their lives. Joy tried to jump in, but Jelly Roll's voice overpowered hers. But you don't care about any of that, do you? Because it doesn't fit your narrative. You already decided who I am, and nothing I say will change your mind. Evidence. Joy scoffed. What evidence? A few donations? Some feel-good prison visits? That's supposed to erase everything you did? The question hit like a lightning strike. Jelly Roll straightened, his expression shifting. When he looked at her again, the anger was going to replace by something deeper, something almost haunting. No, he said quietly. Nothing erases what I did. The studio fell utterly silent. Nothing brings back the people who died because of choices I made. Nothing fixes the families I hurt. Nothing heals the communities I damaged. His voice strengthened. Not with rage, but with truth. And I live with that. Every single day. There was something different in Jelly Roll's voice now. Something that came from a place far deeper than anger. What you're really asking me, he said quietly, is whether I deserve forgiveness. Whether I deserve redemption. Whether someone like me should even be allowed to move forward and try to make things right. He let his gaze move slowly around the studio across the hosts. The audience, even the cameras capturing every second. And the truth is, I don't know if I deserve it. That's not for me to decide. A beat. But I do know this. I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life trying to earn it. What? Joy inhaled, ready to speak. Jelly Roll simply raised a hand. You want to judge me? Fine. Judge me by what I do now. Judge me by the lives I help save. By the kids I keep from going down the same road I did. By the families I help patch back together. His voice steadied, strong. Don't judge me by who I was. Judge me by who I'm becoming. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Joy seemed struck by the raw honesty of it, her face briefly softening with something that looked almost like shame. You came at me today thinking you were going to expose some kind of fraud, Jelly Roll said. His tone calm, but resolute. But all you've exposed is your own belief that people can't change. Your cynicism. Your need to tear others down to feel superior. He straightened, adjusted his shirt, and then turned directly to the camera. To anyone watching this, anyone battling addiction, anyone who's been told they'll never outrun their worst mistake, listen to me. He leaned in. You can change. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But it is possible. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Joy made one last attempt at control. I think you're being overly dramatic, Abo. Jelly Roll cut her off sharply. You attacked my character, my motives, my redemption, and my right to speak about my own life. You tried to tear me down on national television for no reason but your own entertainment. And when I defended myself, when I showed you what accountability actually looks like, you call me dramatic? He shook his head, disgusted. You know what, Joy? You're exactly the kind of person who makes it harder for people to get help. The kind who keeps families divided and communities broken. You are the problem, not me. Then he turned away from her completely. Whoopee, he said, addressing her with quiet respect. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry it turned into this. But I won't apologize for defending myself from someone who came at me with nothing but malice and prejudice. The camera cut to Joy. Her face said everything: shock, regret. The dawning realization that she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Wait, she called as he began walking off. But Jelly Roll didn't turn around. We're done here, he said over his shoulder. Final and unshakable. I came to talk about redemption and hope. You turned it into an attack. That's on you. He walked off set. The studio sat frozen. The hosts were stunned, processing what they had just witnessed. And Joy sat alone at the table, looking smaller than she had at any point. During the interview, like someone who had just learned a painful lesson about the weight of her words, what began as a routine interview had become something far more meaningful. A clash between cynicism and redemption, between the belief that people stay who they were and the belief that they can become someone better. And to everyone in that room, the winner was unmistakable.